Hi friends, welcome for a discussion on Article 4 dealing with the term resident. I would thank Harish and Jugal for their efforts to help me with the presentation. These are some of the terms used: DTA is Double Tax Avoidance Agreement, MAP Mutual Agreement Procedures, and UN stands for United Nations. So, this is the agenda for this discussion. We will have an introduction to the term resident, why it is relevant, meaning under Article 4.1, cases for dual residency, tiebreaker test, and dual residency other than an individual, how it gets resolved. Article 4.3. So, in simple terms, the word resident of a country means a place where a person normally resides. If you look at Section 6 of the Income Tax Act in India, it has a fairly comprehensive case for residency under multiple circumstances. And why is residency important? We go to Section 5, which talks about scope of total income, which again says that the scope for taxation of income is based on the residential status, and that principle doesn't change even in the case of international transactions. So all domestic laws of various countries have specific rule to determine residential status for the purpose of income tax, and determining residential status is of paramount relevance for any country since they have separate provisions for taxing both resident and non-resident. And in some cases, in case of countries with residency-based taxation, determination of the residential status becomes important. Like if you take a case of a country like US, citizenship-based taxes much more important. So, coming back, what is the relevance? The concept of resident of a contracting state in the convention has various functions, and it is of importance in three circumstances. One, in determining a convention scope of application. In solving case of double taxation arises consequent to dual residency, and in solving cases where double taxation arises as a consequence of taxation in the state of residency and in the state of source. So, even for domestic tax, friends, understanding residential status is of paramount relevance for you to know whether an income is actually taxable in a particular state or otherwise. Similarly, in the case of a DTA, as we saw initially itself, for a DTA to be applicable, a person must be a resident of one state and should earn income from another state. So the case for residency is of absolute relevance when it comes to the need to apply a DTA. Because if he is a resident of one country and earning income from the same country, you don't need a DTA. But if you are a resident of one country and you are a resident of a third country and your source of income is from one country received in another country, then again it becomes a case for triangular situation, which is why when and where you are a resident becomes extremely important. And also, as we have seen so far, in the case of dual residency as well, to resolve the conflict resolution rules are also provided by this particular article together with its commentary. Let's try and understand Article 4.1, meaning of the term resident. For the purpose of this convention, the term resident of a contracting state means any person who, under the laws of that state, is liable to tax therein by reason of his domicile, residence, place of incorporation, place of management, or any other criterion of similar nature, and also includes that state and any political subdivision or local authority thereof. This term, however, does not include any person who is liable to tax in that state in respect of only income from sources in that state or capital situated therein. We'll come to that exception part in a while, but first let's focus on the top part. So the article starts off saying a person can be deemed or can be called as a resident if under the domestic law. So the treaty does not define, it makes a reference to the domestic law, and consequent to the provisions of domestic law, the person becomes a resident either by virtue of his domicile, resident, place of incorporation, or place of management. That's very important, or any other criteria. So if you are a resident of India by virtue of number of days, or by the fact that you have your home country here or your economic interest here, most importantly, foreign company having its place of management here. This is why your POEM guidelines can also determine where you are resident. Then you become a resident. The term, however, does not include any person who is liable to tax. Look at the definition. Who is liable to tax in that state in respect of only income from sources in that state or capital situated therein. Let's say I am an investor situated in London and I invest money in shares of an Indian company from which I am getting dividend. Now, dividends I am supposed to pay tax in India based on the Indo-UK treaty. The withholding rate will be mentioned. Just because I am liable to tax in India, I don't become a resident here. So this is where the difference need to be very clear. Just because someone is liable to tax, he does not become a resident. But a resident is someone, if you go to the first sentence, second line, a resident is someone who is liable to tax by reason of his domicile, residence, place of incorporation, or any other criterion of similar nature. So let's be very clear, friends. Merely because you are liable to tax by virtue of your income from sources in that state or your capital which you have deployed in that state, you don't become a resident. But a resident is someone who is liable to tax consequent to his domicile, residence, place of incorporation, or place of management. Hope that distinction is very, very clear. It's an important distinction as well. Now, any person will be considered as a resident if and only if he is liable to pay tax on the grounds of domicile, residence, place of incorporation, POEM, or any other criterion, as we saw earlier. And liable to tax, in general practice, persons subject to tax laws are treated as persons liable to be taxed. The actual payment of tax is not mandatory. However, in some states, entities are not considered as liable to tax if they are exempt consequent to certain provisions. These entities could be regarded as resident only if specifically provided by the contracting state. Let's take the case of a company which has a tax holiday based out of SEZ, a special economic zone. Of course, they all have MAT. That's a different situation, though you might call MAT as an advance payment or whatever. Still, they could be regarded as a resident if the home country jurisdiction laws provide for it. And contracting states which take the second view are free to address the issue in bilateral negotiations. So whenever they say that if it is exempt and by virtue of their exemption they are not treated as resident or otherwise, this can be a case for bilateral negotiation. Now, we also saw state government being a resident of a state government, political subdivision, or local authority. All these are included within the term resident of a country. So a resident of a country includes state government, resident as per the state government, political subdivision, or local authority. And political subdivision, if we see, it includes counties, cities, towns, villages, and special districts. Local authority is an administrative body in local government, which is also called as a local authority. So when you look at the model commentary notes, any person who earns income from a contracting state is liable to pay tax in that state only on the income earned from that state. Classic case of source-based taxation, and not on worldwide income, as they are specifically excluded from the definition of the term of resident of a contracting state. So same is the case with India. If a non-resident has investments in India, only the income from investments are taxable. His global income is not taxed in India. But if unless of course, now we have as per the amended section 6, thanks to Finance Act 2020, you have a peculiar case where a non-resident but a citizen of India who is not taxed elsewhere in the world will be deemed as a resident of India, but still based on the number of days it can be a resident, or 99% it will be a resident and not ordinary resident. The moment someone is a not ordinary resident, his global income is not by default taxed in India. And of course you have the case for DTAs, which also will have an impact on how such incomes are taxed. If a contracting state disregards partnership for taxation purposes, where it's a fiscally transparent entity, and treats it as a fiscally transparent entity, and it taxes partners on its share of partnership income, then the partnership is not liable to tax, as it will not be considered as a resident of that state. So the residential status will be a function of the domicile or any other criterion of the partners of the firm and not the partnership entity. So if we were to look at certain India specific DTAs, India Singapore, para 1, article 4.1, the term resident of a contracting state means any person who is a resident of a contracting state in accordance with the domestic laws, taxation laws of that state. When we say state, it technically means the country of residence. It cannot be a country of source, because if a person is a resident of a country of source, you don't need a DTA itself. So please have that in mind, friends. India-Russia Treaty, the term resident means a person who, under the laws of that state, is liable to tax by reason of his domicile, residence, place of registration, or management, or any other criterion. India-UAE, so here we've got two different terms. In case of India, any person who, under the laws of India, is liable to tax in India by virtue of any of the criterion which we have seen. It does not, however, include a person who is liable to tax in India in respect only of his income from sources in India. So we don't treat a non-resident or a not ordinary resident technically. In the case of a UAE state, an individual who is present in the UAE for period or periods totaling in the aggregate at least 183 days in the calendar year concerned, and the company which is incorporated in the UAE and which is managed and controlled wholly in UAE becomes a resident. So you would have different definitions based on bilateral negotiations. So there is no one size fits all kind of a scenario here. So any practical situation has to be dealt with from the specific jurisdiction with which the transaction actually happens. Dual residency. This is a classic case. Now, where by reason of the provisions of para 1, an individual is a resident of both the contracting states, then his status shall be determined as follows. He shall be deemed to be a resident only if the state in which he has a permanent home available to him. If he has a permanent home available in both states, then he shall be a resident only of the state in which his personal and economic relationships are closer, what we call as place of vital interest. If the place of his center of vital interest cannot be determined, or if he has not a permanent home available in either state, he shall be deemed to be a resident only of the state in which he has a habitual abode, where he regularly stays. And however, what happens if he has a habitual abode in both states or in none of them? He shall be deemed to be a resident only of the state of which he is a national, where he is a citizen of whichever of the states, he shall be deemed as a resident there. If he is a national of both the states or none of them, then the competent authorities of the contracting state shall settle this by mutual agreement. So if you notice this, friends, there could be a circumstance where someone is deemed as deemed to be a resident of both the countries. Let's take an example. Let's say, as far as India is concerned, if someone fulfills a 60-day and 365-day clause, becomes a resident. And Singapore says, if you are in my country for more than 180 days in that year, you become a resident. So going by this logic, someone has been in Singapore for 200 days and 120 days and 160 days in India, and this pattern continues. He will fulfill the 180-day regulation in Singapore. He will fulfill the 60 and 360-day criterion as per section 6 in India. So he is a resident of both India and Singapore. Now, this is a case of dual residency of an individual. Then what you will see? You will see where this gentleman has a permanent home. If he has a permanent home in India, then he becomes a resident of India. What if he has a permanent home in both the places or in none of these? Then you go to the place where he has kept his economic interests or personal relation, where his family is staying or where he has kept his savings. Then you go down, where if that also cannot be demarcated clearly, then you go down to the place where he actually regularly resides. If that also cannot be found out, then you go to a place, to the country in which he is a national, to which passport he holds. If he does not hold both India as well as Singaporean passport, say he holds a Sri Lankan passport, then the competent authorities of India and Singapore will sit and decide which country shall be deemed has the right to claim him as the resident of its territory. Now, an individual, this is what in a typical, when you play tennis, in a set, if you reach 6 all, you go to what is called as tiebreaker. So this is what we call as the tiebreaker rule when an individual is deemed to be a resident of both the countries. So you go based on permanent home, central of vital interest or economic interest, habitual abode, nationality, and then you, if none of these are possible, then you go to the settlement by competent authorities. The order what we are saying 1, 2, 3, 4 shall be chronologically adopted. You don't jump to nationality first. No, you start off from permanent home and then you keep moving down. This is a flowchart for your easier understanding. If someone is a resident, then you check for permanent home. If whether he has a permanent home in both or neither of them, the answer is no. Then you go to the country in which he has a permanent home, will be deemed as a resident. Likewise for every condition. So this flowchart shall help you solve a case for tiebreaker. Fairly simple. Next. Notes from model commentary. Permanent home is necessary for determining the residential status. Home includes a house or an apartment belonging to or rented by the individual. Rented furnished room can also be deemed as a home. And suppose a person has a home in one state and sets up a home in the second state and also retains the first home. The fact that he has retained the first in the environment where he has always lived, where he has worked, and where he has his family and possessions can, together with other elements, go to demonstrate that he has retained his central of vital interest in the first state. It's a possible interpretation which can happen. We saw what will happen for an individual. Now, what happens in the case of dual residency of other entities other than individual? Now, before we get into the article, let's try and take a sample case. You have 3 Indian brothers resident in India, citizens of India. They've set up a company in, let's say, UK, in London. But the 3 of them sit in India, they manage the affairs there. Going by the new provision of Section 6, Place of Effective Management Guidelines, there is a very high possibility that the POEM or the place of effective management of this UK company is India. Therefore, India will say this company is a resident of India. But the company registered out of UK. And UK is not a tax haven. It's a regular jurisdiction. But UK will say, no, this company is incorporated in my country. Therefore, this company has to be deemed as a resident of my country. In such situations, how would you address? That's what Article 4.3 gives as a guidance about. Where by reason of the provisions of Para 1, a person other than an individual is a resident of both the contracting states. The competent authorities of the contracting state shall endeavour to determine, by mutual agreement, the contracting state of which such person shall be deemed to be a resident for the purpose of the convention, having regard to place of effective management, the place of incorporation, or otherwise constituted, and any other relevant factors. In the absence of such agreement, such person shall not be entitled to any relief or exemption from tax by this convention, except to the extent and in such manner as may be agreed upon by the competent authorities of the contracting state. So, where there is a conflict for persons other than individuals, for individuals we saw the tiebreaker rule and those 5 steps. But for non-individuals, it is straightforward. It has to be by the competent authorities. And if they fail to agree, the assessee will not get any benefit under the treaty. So, in the case of persons other than individuals, the residency shall be determined by the competent authority based on mutual agreement, considering various factors like place of management, place of incorporation, or constitution, or any other relevant factors. An entity can have more than one place of management, but it can have only one place of effective management at any one point in time. And if no such mutual agreement is arrived at by the states, then the person shall not be entitled to any DTA benefit. The non-determination of POEM, however, will not prevent the taxpayer from being considered a resident of each of the contracting states for purposes other than granting treaty reliefs or exemptions to that person. So there could be a very high possibility of a double taxation in such cases. Now let's try and understand the difference between OECD and UN. 4.1, it doesn't consider place of incorporation as one of the reasons for liable to tax, where here it is included. The term resident includes resident recognized provident fund. For UN does not include a recognized provident fund. So these were some of the relevant concepts which need to be understood in our opinion to understand this particular article. Thank you.